Okay, it looks like pretty much everyone is here, so we're going to get started. Welcome everyone. This is the Data Systems webinar on where and how to store your data. I'm Sarah McCruden. I'm the Technology and Information Specialist for Carson Research Consulting. We are a research and evaluation firm in Baltimore City, and we serve a variety of nonprofit clients who they'll often come to us with data system and storage needs. They're not sure where or how to store their data, or they have a system in place already, but it's not really working for them. They need some guidance on how to restructure the database, and it's a problem that we come across a lot. So we've designed this webinar to serve individuals who are in that position, so people who want to learn more about options that are available to them, especially things that are inexpensive and that they might already have available to them, they just don't really know about it. And so I'm hoping that this will be useful to everyone who's here today. Let's get started. All right, I have program data, now what? So this is kind of the question that gets at the crux of the issue for most of our clients. And we have people who come in who don't have any electronic data storage in place and just keep count in their heads or have everything on paper. So don't be discouraged if that's the position that you're in. Or if you have a database already that's functioning but is really you're not getting out of it what you need, you can get to a place where you're getting everything that you need out of your data system. And I'm hoping that we can help you get there today. So we're going to start by talking about some of the things to consider in choosing the right data system for your program, because there's a lot of things to take into consideration. And then we're going to work our way into some examples of things that are available to you. So I have an exercise that I'll have you guys do about halfway through that will help pinpoint your data needs. And when we're looking at data systems, I'm really going to place an emphasis on things that are easy to use and things that are free or cheap, like around $200, because I know that that can be a point of contention for a few people. So we'll take a quick look at a few of the examples as well, and especially look at resources you may already have available to you. So let's start with what is a data system, just to clarify what we're talking about here. By a data system, I mean any place where you store your data. So preferably this is software that's going to allow you to search, organize, and report on your findings. So I say this because I don't mean that you have to have complex database software or something that's marketed as database software. It can be as simple as an Excel spreadsheet, or it can be as complex as a SQL database with a custom user interface. Really, any of these things would fall into the description of a data system if it's what works for your program. So we're going to look at a few different examples of what might work for your program based on a few different constraining factors. So here are some things to consider. Where are you going? So ideally, when you're mapping out this data systems journey, you're going to choose the best system for you and then plan the journey around it. But realistically, this is all going to depend on where you start, right? So you may be starting from scratch, and the pros of starting from scratch are that you get to choose the right system and build it correctly the first time, which is great if that's the position that you're in, that you have just data on paper, or you've been keeping count in your head and you're ready to move to an electronic system. You're in a great position to choose the right system and build everything correctly. The cons here are that you may have to pay for it. You'll likely have to pay for it if you're looking at a complex database software. And you risk making mistakes in software choices or database structure that will come back to haunt you. Not to freak you out or anything, but it's just something that there's a lot more that you may not consider when you're first setting up your database than when you have something already in place that you can look back and say, oh, these are the things that need to be corrected. And I say this as someone who got started doing data entry in a database that was very poorly designed. And a lot of what I learned about how to build and structure databases came from learning from the mistakes that other people made in setting up a database in the wrong way. So there are pros and cons to starting from scratch. And likewise, there are pros and cons to migrating a legacy or existing data system. The pros are this is the devil you know. So you have the known quantity here, and you can identify the things that work and the things that don't, and try to fix the things that don't so that you're left with a great data system. And that wasn't the case when you started from scratch, right? You had to really start with a blank slate and not know what those mistakes were going to be early on. It might already also be paid for, which is great. The cons are that it may be poorly organized. It may be so poorly organized that it's not as easy as just making a few fixes and things are perfect for you. And it may utilize a system that you don't like, or you or your staff don't know how to use, or is no longer meeting the needs of your organization. A lot of organizations will simply outgrow their systems, and it might have worked for you 5 years ago, and it just simply doesn't work well for you anymore, and you're looking for something better. So no matter which you're coming from, whether you are starting from scratch or migrating a legacy database system, all of the constraints that we'll talk about and the possible solutions that we'll go over will apply to you. So now we're going to go over some of the constraints. So these are the things that you might want to consider when you're looking at database systems. And we're going to complete a worksheet on these items shortly. So as we go through them, just think about how much or how little these items might relate to your own data needs. So obviously, cost upfront and ongoing is at the top of the list for a lot of people. It's usually the biggest constraining factor, which is why I put it at the top of the list, especially for nonprofits. And you have to think about that upfront and ongoing cost, because a lot of database systems will have their main cost upfront, but then the fees can really add up over time, especially if they are hosting the database for you, which I will talk about what that means with some of the options that we go over later. So you really need to consider all of the costs when you're talking about cost as a constraining factor. And some people are working with a limited budget, so it really is a big constraint for them. Staff experiences and resources. So this is both the time that your staff has for learning a new system, the time that they have for entering the data, and if needed, the money that you have available for hiring someone to help with a database. So this is both in terms of what your staff has available in time and resources, and what your organization has in terms of monetary resources for helping out with the database. The complexity of your data sets and desired reports. So we'll get into this a bit more with some of the examples, but if you want to do a report template that's 10 pages long and is filled with aggregate totals for all of your participants about really complex things that you're reporting on, not just like a summary of data as it appears in each record. So like you're not taking a survey and then having a report that spits out the answers. Like you want to get complex aggregate totals based on those answers. Then you need to consider this when you're choosing a solution. So we will go over that, what that kind of means when we look at some of the results, but it is one of the top things to consider when you're choosing your database system. The amount of data you have. So this is more relevant if you have hundreds of thousands of records. And when I say record, I mean like one entry for a survey is a record. Even if that survey has 100 different questions on it. The one survey answer is one record. One participant is also one record. That's kind of how things are measured in databases. So the amount of data is a considering factor, but most people won't have so much data that they can't use some of the things that we're going to go over today. So I really wouldn't be concerned unless we'll go over with some of the exact examples what that means in terms of the amount of data. The number of users and remote access capabilities required. This is a big one. So some systems are only going to let you do local data entry. So that means that either on your machine or if you have a shared network at your organization, you can also use a shared network as a local thing. So it's not available online. If you need remote access or you need to be able to get to it online, so like if you're at home, you need to be able to do data entry. If you have people who are out in the field and they need to be able to log in from wherever they are and do their data entry there, that means you need remote access capabilities. And that seriously constrains your options. And we'll go over what some of those options are. Number of users is also, it's more generally just whether you have like 10 people that you need logging in and making changes in your database, or whether you have 100 people. I don't mean down to the very last user what the number of users is. I just mean more generally, do you have a lot of users, or do you have 10 that are making changes? Security requirements. So this is partly what's built in on your computer system for some of the local things. Most of the online solutions will have robust security mechanisms built into them already. And I do want to say that there's no such thing as a 100% secure database. We see all the time data breaches at companies like Bank of America, and if they can have data breaches, anyone can, because they've spent tons of money on getting the highest security mechanisms they can afford. So there is no such thing as 100% secure database, but you can make it more difficult for people to get to your data versus less difficult. So we will talk about what some of those things are that are built into the solutions that we talk about, but this is really just a matter of whether or not you are storing HIPAA-protected data, whether or not you have any built-in security on your computer systems at your organization, things like that. Compatibility. So if you have an old operating system, this is basically just if you are on really old computers at your organization and you don't have the option to upgrade, you'd want to say that compatibility is a high constraining factor for you, because you don't have the capacity to upgrade, then certain software is not going to work on older machines. And how you currently collect data if you wish to preserve an existing format. So this is mainly just if you've already got a system in place, like you use SurveyMonkey to collect survey data and you want to preserve that and you want to make sure that staff are still using the same system, they don't have to transition to something new, then one of your constraining factors may be that you want to choose a system that works with what you're already using to collect data. Make sure that they can integrate with each other properly. Okay, and I'm making a few assumptions about these constraints for the purposes of the people who are listening to this webinar. I'm assuming that you don't have unlimited funds to spend on a database. Just as a nonprofit, that's usually the case. If you did have unlimited funds, there are a lot of great options open to you. A top tier option I would go with would be a custom built application with a SQL database as the back end. And you can have a custom built application done in PHP and HTML. You can do it in Ruby on Rails, Python, Perl. They're all just different coding languages that can be used to build the front end, which communicates with the database that's on the back end, and that's where your data is stored. But again, I'm assuming that nobody listening to this has that capacity. Otherwise, that's probably what you'd already be doing, right? The second assumption is that you're not a software developer or a database architect yourself. So the staff experiences or resources is that you don't yourself have the experience necessary to build a SQL database backend with an application front end. You're looking for something that you can use as the average user or the average program manager, something that will work for you and your staff without having to be a database architect yourself. The amount of data, this is just assuming that you don't have petabyte level storage, so you're not running Google, you're not running Amazon.com. You don't have millions of people trying to get at your records every second. You can have a lot of data. I'm just saying that you don't have big data. That's what we would commonly refer to as big data, is things like the type of data that Google stores. And the security requirements is just that you're not storing government secrets, because there are some security measures that are heightened for things like government organizations. It's okay if you have things like HIPAA protected data. That's different than having things like government secrets. So those are just the constraints, what I'm assuming about the constraints that you have for your organization and the target audience that I'm speaking to right now. Okay, so we're going to do a group exercise. I have for everyone, you should have on your sidebar a document called Prioritizing that you can download. And it's going to look like what you see on your screen here. So basically, it has all of the things that I just went over: the cost, staff experience, complexity of data sets, amount of data, number of users, how you collect data, and compatibility. So I'm going to ask that you download that document and you rank from 1 to 7, or even just rank your top 3, just isolate which are your top 3. What is most important to your organization? So if you have an organization that has very little money to spend, but you have staff that are very experienced in how to use a database, then you'd want to rank cost as your number 1 high priority and rank the staff experience as low, somewhere around number 7. And I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to complete this. So if you can just download that and fill it out very quickly. It would be helpful so that when we're going through all of the examples, you'll know exactly which items you are looking for as your priorities, because all of the options I go over, I'm going to say, this is the best option for people who ranked this as a high priority and this as a low priority. So this is about isolating what is the highest level of need for your organization. And if anyone has any questions, you can pop them in the chat and I will try and address them. So I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes to complete that, and then we will move forward. Okay, it's been about 5 minutes, so I'm going to get started again. I hope everyone's had time to look that over and just isolate a few of their top concerns. Yeah, I have a question come in, so let me just read this really quickly. Okay, Lauren, I will try to get to your question at the end. Hopefully, I will answer it over the course of the presentation because I'm going to go over a few different case management and social work options. So hopefully, I will get to that. But if not, then we will readdress it at the end. Okay, so the first category that we kind of have here is the web-based commercial off-the-shelf solutions. So these are applications that were custom built by developers somewhere once, the sort of thing that you would do if you had unlimited funds. But now anyone who gets the database are going to get different modules and systems that they have in place that are common across programs and are used to track records. So different software programs have different degrees of customization that they offer. And these are not all of them, the ones that you see on your screen. These are just a sampling of different programs. They're generally built for and work best for a specific area of data storage. So for fundraising and donor management software, outcomes tracking, case management, sometimes they'll have specialized modules for things like drug testing and substance abuse, or just tracking contacts with clients. So these are the things that have been, they were built up from scratch once, but now you're kind of forced to fit into their cookie cutter sort of mold for how they see different programs. And that's sort of the problem with them, is that I've never come across two nonprofits that have the same data needs. In fact, they're usually vastly different. So the one-size-fits-all approach is unlikely to be a perfect fit. Sometimes it'll be workable, or it might be a good starting point, and you can adapt to something that fits. But finding something that's the perfect fit right out of the box can be really hard to do. That being said, these are generally a good solution if you rank staff experience and complexity of data sets as high priority. So that means that you don't have the staff experience or the resources to train people to really work with a database system. You need something that right out of the box is going to be user-friendly for everyone. And complexity of data sets just means that you have a pretty complex set of data, or like in the case that you were talking about, Lauren, that you have HIPAA-protected data and you need to have different front ends for different people. These might be a good selection for you. I don't generally suggest them as the first sort of line of defense, just because I've talked to a lot of people who have struggled with them. So they're not the perfect solution, even if you have the money for them. So it's also programs that rank cost as a low priority because they can be quite costly. The low end for one of these that I've seen is around $5,000 as the startup cost. The high end is over $20,000. And that's just for startups. So sometimes they can be up to $20,000 a year just in maintenance fees. And they're generally hosted externally by the company, so you don't have to do any hosting yourself. If anyone has specific questions about specific programs, either that are on this list or that you've heard of, feel free to email me, because I've had demos and price estimates for a lot of database providers. And I can usually give a little bit of insight about specific providers. We're not going to go into detail about any of the specific commercial off-the-shelf solutions. That being said, I've yet to find the perfect one from any company where the users don't have any complaints. So you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt. The next thing would be web-based CRM platforms. So CRM is customer or constituent relationship management. In the for-profit world, they would think of it as customer relationship management, but for nonprofits, we're generally thinking constituents, so we're thinking participants or anyone who's we're serving through our program. So these aren't going to support your needs right out of the box, most likely, but they can be customized to the point where they will. So a CRM is a good choice for programs that need to track complicated relationships within and across the programs they serve. A good example for this is Goodwill. They do things, they track a lot of different things. So they track items are donated, money's donated, items are bought online, items are bought in stores, people are receiving training and workforce development services, job placements. They're tracking a lot of different things that are related, and they're all related to what the program is providing, but it's a very complex series of relationships. For someone like them, a web-based CRM platform, especially because they have very specific needs that are probably not the same as other organizations. So that's where kind of that one-size-fits-all approach might not work for them. Something like a web-based CRM platform is a good solution. And these are just 3 of the popular ones that I've heard a lot about. There are many others out there. The pricing for these will vary. With Salesforce, I know you can get up to 10 licenses for free with a 501c nonprofit status. And it's flexible like a general relational database. So these are going to be complicated to get started. So that's why these are for programs that rank staff experience and resources as a low priority. But if you have complexity of data sets as a high priority, and you maybe don't have the funds to do something like a commercial off-the-shelf system, or you have something that's so complex that it doesn't fit into the box of what a commercial off-the-shelf system would offer, then I would recommend a web-based CRM platform for your organization. The next one is the web-based relational database builder that does not require coding. So I'm not including anything in here that requires coding because I'm assuming that people here aren't experienced in coding. But these are all relational database builders that don't require you to code. And a lot of these have a free version. Sometimes that free version will restrict the amount of data or the number of tables that you can have. And then once you get the paid version, you can allow more. I think all of these, their names are pretty self-explanatory of what they are, except the G stands for Grubba. They won't support your case management or outcomes tracking right out of the box the way the commercial off-the-shelf one will. But eventually they could get you there. The thing is you may need to hire someone to help you to do this. So that's why this is for programs that rank staff experience and resources as a low priority. So they do have either some staff who are experienced enough to do this, or they have some of the monetary resources to hire someone who could help out with this. One of the cons is that eventually they may charge you, and depending on how complex your data set is, you may need to do something like a web-based CRM anyway. So basically the only difference between this one and the last one, the web-based CRM platforms, is the cost piece. If you ranked complexity of data sets as high and cost as a high priority because you don't have a lot to spend, I would use the web-based relational database builder instead of the web-based CRM platform. But that being said, the web-based CRM platform can probably do a lot more and is a lot more robust. So it might be worth that extra cost if you have the funds to spend. And you will probably eventually have to pay anyway with these because once you've got enough data in them, they are going to start charging you. So now we're going to go over a couple of options, local and web-based solutions that you probably already have. These are my favorite ones to go over because they're things that people already have available to them most likely, and they can get started using right away if they're working off of paper records and they really have nothing in place yet. I think they're a great resource, and people are either only generally aware of some of the things they can do, or they aren't really aware that it would apply to them at all. So these are Google Sheets and Google Forms are the first 2 icons, and then Excel and Access, which are Microsoft programs that most people have. Access is if you don't have it as part of your Microsoft Office package, it comes with Microsoft Office Professional, which not everyone has. It's about $200 as a standalone program. So if Access looks, we're going to take a look at an example of it. If it looks like something that is really what you had in mind, you could get it for about $200. So we're going to take a look at examples of each of these. The first is Microsoft Excel, which pretty much everyone is familiar with, but not necessarily familiar with using it as a data system. Can everyone hear me? Okay, can everyone hear me again? Yes, okay. Sorry, it said connection was lost there for a second, but we're back. Okay, so the first is Microsoft Excel, which most people are familiar with, but they may not use it as a data system. So Excel it's ideal for unrelated data sets that don't require relationship ties. That's probably how you've already used it. You've probably used it as a way to organize data that you don't need across the different sheets for the data to be communicating with one another. Flat files where all the records have a common identifier. We're going to look at an example of what that looks like. And data entry and analysis that does not need to be done online and is going to be accessed by only a few people at a time. So we're going to take a look at what that looks like, and then we'll talk about when it's a good choice for your program. So I'm going to exit out of my presentation and take you to my sample drug treatment program spreadsheet. So this is a sample spreadsheet that I came up with, that each of these sheets has different data in it. We have one for our participant info, one for survey results, which I just made up some survey results for everyone, one for drug test results, and one for combined info. So the combined info is using a series of formulas that pulls from all of these different sheets to pull together the survey results, by the client ID. So all of these have the client ID on them, and that's the crucial piece here. They all have the client ID, and it will find on the first page the client ID that goes to that participant. It will match it up with the survey ID for that participant, with the name, their responses on the survey, and then it does a count of the number of drug test results that are positive for March, the number of drug test results that are positive for February, the number of drug test results that are positive for April, and that are positive for May. So we end up with this combined total spreadsheet of our data that came across these different sheets. Now, the important thing, again, to note here is that they all have the client ID. So that's what I meant when I said that you have these flat files of information, but that they all have a common identifier. If they did not all have the same client ID on them, if they had a different type of ID, this wouldn't work in Excel. So if you have, sometimes you're identifying your participants by their social security number, and sometimes you're identifying them by like a student ID. If you have sometimes the data coming in with just one ID or the other, Excel's not going to be a great choice for you because you need to have the same ID across all of the different places. That's the only way you're going to be able to pull the combined info in this way. And again, this is going to be something that you're probably, if you're not experienced with Excel, you're probably going to need some help getting to this point. You'll need someone to help you set this up. And so that's a level of staff experience and complexity that you have to take into account. But the cool thing is that at the end, you got this little, this is actually an app, which you can get if you have 20, this is in Excel 2013. You go to Insert, you can go to the App Store and get this app for free. It's called Modern Trend. And it will show you a dashboard graph of your, so this is my combined info shown as a dashboard graph. So I put it into a pivot table. So we're looking at the average number of positive drug screens, and we can split it down by the quarter. We can look at it by male versus female, and it's going to let me, and you can take off and put on your data labels here. And basically, it just gives you a cool visual representation of your data. So this is a way that we used Excel to take 3 distinct sets of data, which could have come from anywhere. It could have come from your paper records. It could have come from, this is the kind of survey results that you generally get out of something like SurveyMonkey. And this is a participant list that just gives very basic information about participants. And it'll put it into something digestible that you can look at as a dashboard view. So this is using Excel in that way. again, this is something that everyone probably has available to them, and it's a free resource, but using a free resource comes with its drawbacks, right? So this is good for programs that rank cost, compatibility, and staff experience as high priorities. Kind of have an asterisk on that staff experience because you'll probably need someone to help you set it up, even though the ongoing use of it will be relatively easy. For some, this would be if you ranked highly how you currently collect data, because a lot of people use Excel for collecting their data as it is. And programs that rank number of users, remote access, and complexity of data sets as low priorities. So you don't have very complex data sets. As I showed there, it was kind of, we had 3 distinct sets of data that were not very involved, what we were looking at. And they didn't need online access. So you don't need to be able to get online to access this, because you won't be able to do that with Excel unless you use it in conjunction with other software. Just as a kind of aside, you can have about 65,000 rows in a spreadsheet. That's in Excel 2002 and 2003. I think you can have like over a million rows in 2007 through 2013. So you can have a lot of data. It's just the complexity of how you want things to relate to one another. In the case of what we just looked at, it was just simply looking at, here's this person, here's what they said on this survey, and here's how many times they had a positive drug screen in this month. And that's a pretty, by data standards, not a very complex thing to look at. So that's Microsoft Excel. Google Sheets and Google Forms, which is a really cool one to look at. This allows for online data entry, and it can be done by people who don't see all the results. And it can be used by programs that require remote access or need multiple users at once. Unrelated data sets that don't require relationship ties. So this is the same thing as what I was saying with Excel, that you can either have unrelated data sets, which is normally how people use Excel, or flat files where all the records have a common identifier, so they all have that client ID. So basically, the Google Sheets and Google Forms is going to be a lot like Excel, except that you can use it online and you can have this cool form. So I'm going to show you an example of a fake Google form that I made. So this is a Google form for a drug treatment program for client intake. So we'll just put in a test one. This is test data anyway. We submit it. So as someone who is viewing this, you can make this so that the person who submits it can edit the response or can't. You can make it so that they can submit another response or can't. You can also make it so that they can see the results if you want them to see them, but generally you won't want people to see it if they're taking it online. And then it shows up here. So this is my Google Sheet, which is in my Google Docs, and it just populated this row for me of test data. And it works the same. So basically, we're going to take this data out of here. We take it out and work with it the same way that we would work with Excel. The difference here is going to be that with Google Sheets, you can use this cool online form to have people submitting things, rather than here where in order to add new participants, you're going to have to scroll down to the bottom of this list and put someone new in there on the next 3 lines. There is a built-in form mechanism for Excel, but it's really clunky and difficult to use. So the easiest way to do it is just to add a new line of data, which you don't necessarily want everyone who's accessing this to be able to see everyone else's data. So here you can have people in the drug treatment program or the counselors in the drug treatment program submitting, okay, I just did a drug test with such and such, and they had a negative result for today, and they submit it, and then you have the data showing up on your Google Drive. So that's a cool thing that is free. That's, again, really cool thing to have available to you for free. It's a good choice for programs that rank cost compatibility and staff experience as high priority. And the number of users and remote access can also be a high priority for this one, as opposed to with Excel, because we can use this online. It's not a good choice for programs that have complex data sets, and that it might be a problem for how you currently collect data, just because you're not already using Google Sheets and Google Forms. you may have to get people used to using them. But it is pretty easy to use and pretty easy to build sheets and forms with it. So I highly recommend it for anyone who's working with a very small budget and needs to be able to find something to use pretty quickly. And the last one we're going to look at is Microsoft Access. So Access is ideal for large and or related data sets requiring relationship ties, which I'll show you what that looks like. Multiple files which may not have a common identifier across them, and data entry or analysis that does not have to be done online and is going to be accessed by less than 40 to 100 people at a time, or less than 15 for editing. So you can have 100 people going into the same Access database at a time. If you have it on a shared drive, it will function with 100 people looking at it at a time. You don't want more than 15 people trying to edit records at a time, because that's more taxing on the database than just looking at it. But for a small organization that doesn't need online access, that sounds redundant, Access is a good choice. So let's take a look at what an Access database looks like. Oops. Okay. So I pulled this up with you, so you can make it so that your tables are hidden, which I would normally do if I was pulling this up, having the client pull it up, but I'm showing the tables just for the purpose of this demonstration. So you can have it so that a login window pops up when they come in and it tells me that I've been verified and welcomes me. This is a reminder window so that you can have a different reminder show for different clients and people. So we have this navigation menu, and from here we can search for a client. We have this kind of centralized menu thing. All of this can be customized for whatever design scheme you want. We can select a client. We've overwritten all of them with the name fake, and then I'm going to put it in test. So if we go, we can pull up their dashboard. So from here, we can add a new intake, new follow-up, different forms that this particular program that this was modeled after actually needed. Any of these things could be changed, obviously. This is just a blank form that was built up from scratch. And then if we wanted to run program reports, this is the program reports screen that I designed for them that would just let them report on a number of different things that were of interest to their group. So like if we want to see the total clients by city of residence, we're going to put in the dates, and then it's going to pull up back here. It pulls up by the city, the number of people that were served in each city. So we have our list that there's lots of them in Baltimore City and various numbers in the different Baltimore area because we are a Baltimore-based firm. So that's the really cool thing about Access, is that it's really, really robust. And now we're going to take a look at what the database tools are, so you can see what I mean about linking records. So this is where you tell, this is the relationships window, and you would tell Access how you want all of your data to be related. This is on some level or another, any SQL-based database is going to have this sort of mechanism in place. It's just that Access has a cool visual sort of front end for it. So this shows that for our different clients that are only, so each of these is one of our tables that is over here. And in our client table, we have only the Access ID, but on the intake table, they have an intake ID. So if we have new intakes that come in that don't have an Access ID on them, they only have an intake ID, we can see who it is that we're dealing with and get all of their demographic information because we have this relationship window that shows, okay, this Access ID corresponds to this person, their intake ID. So you have this web of relationships that shows between each of the different forms and the different tables how they are related to one another. It's really cool and really complex. The problem with Access is that you do have to have, there is a bit of a learning curve for it, right? So it is something that, if we take a look now at our, where I think it's a good choice, it would be for programs that rank cost, compatibility, and amount of data as high priorities and complexity of data sets, because you can have very complex data sets, and programs that rank number of users and remote access as a low priority because you can't have remote access. But you'll notice that it doesn't say staff experience and resources as a high priority, because you do need to have a little bit of experience, or you at least need to have the resources to bring someone in to help you out with the initial build. Once it's already built, it's very easy to use. So that's something that costs about $200 that you may already have available to you that you can use basically for free. And that's why I like Access a lot. So that's it. We hope you've learned some helpful tips. I know that some people probably have certain commercial off-the-shelf systems in mind that they are considering, and I would definitely welcome you to drop me a line. This is my email address. I'd be happy to share any information I have about specific systems. I didn't really build into this presentation any information about specific systems because there are a lot of them, and depending on the needs of your organization, you may be better tailored to one versus the other. So if you have specific questions about your organization and what your needs are and which one is the best fit for you, definitely send me an email. You can also check out Carson Research's website. But if anyone else has any other questions, I can take questions now. I think we have about 10 minutes left. So if anyone has any questions, you're welcome to pop them into the question screen and I will answer them. Yes, the webinar slides will be available. I'm actually recording the webinar, so to anyone who is registered for it, you'll be able to view them, and I'll make sure that everybody gets a link to the recorded version. All right. There are no other questions? Did I cover everything completely? Okay. Well, I will stick around, so you are welcome to post any questions in the question box, and I will address them individually. And again, I will make sure everyone gets the recording of this webinar to be able to reference it at a later time. But thank you, everyone, for attending, and I hope that you learned something that will be helpful for your organization or helped you to prioritize what your needs are so you can use that going forward when you're selecting your data system. Lauren, as far as I know, Google Docs are as secure as Dropbox would be. It depends on what your exact security needs are. So nothing is going to be as secure as keeping it on a local machine and encrypted on your local machine. Because as soon as you put it online, it opens it up to the additional possibility of people getting into it. And that's true of even a super secure system like Bank of America's online database. As soon as they put it online, it's more susceptible. But the Google Docs are pretty secure. If you have specific concerns about like how to make it more secure or anything like that, I can definitely address that if you send me an email. If you mean whether Google Docs is HIPAA compliant, that I would have to check and let you know. As far as I know, it should be, but let me confirm and make sure that that is the case, and I will get back to you.